Hello and welcome to our podcast episode number 23, The Epic Conclusion. Paul Atreides unleashes his fury on Arrakis. I'm Timothy, and I am here with my dear friend Thomas. Tonight, we are going to talk about Dune. Part 2, there will be spoilers. Dune. Part 2 is a 2024 American epic science fiction film directed by Denis Villeneuve. It follows Paul Atreides as he unites with the Fremen people of Arrakis to wage war against House Harkonnen and achieve his destiny as the Messiah, like Kwisatz Haderach. Well, Tom, did you enjoy Dune Part 2?
Well, Tim, I must say that I found it quite passable. The visuals were exactly stunning as expected from Villeneuve. But what really stood out for me was the performances. Chalamet and Zendaya once again delivered powerhouse performances as Paul and Chani respectively. Their chemistry on screen is palpable, and it's clear that they both have a deep understanding of their characters. However, I must confess that I am not the biggest fan of science fiction films in general. They often tend to feel too convoluted or overly reliant on special effects for my taste. Done. Part 2 is no exception in this regard. The story can be quite difficult to follow at times, especially if you're not familiar with the source material. Now, Timothy, I know that you have a soft spot for fiction and have seen both parts of this adaptation. How did you find it?
Well, Thomas, I'm sorry to hear that you didn't enjoy it more as much as I did. To be honest, I found your comment about science fiction films quite interesting. You know, for someone who has spent his entire life working in the audio department of the BBC and being surrounded by some of the most talented storytellers in history, I have to say that I've always had a soft spot for fiction. And when it comes to Dune, Part 2, well, let me tell you, I must admit that I was initially skeptical about this adaptation. The original novel is considered a classic of science fiction literature and has been adapted for the screen before, with mixed results. However, Denis Villeneuve has proven himself to be an exceptional filmmaker who understands how to bring complex source material to life on the big screen. And after seeing both parts of this adaptation back to back, I can confidently say that he has succeeded admirably. The story picks up right where Part 1 left off, with Paul Atreides leading his Fremen followers in a war against House Harkonnen for control over the desert planet Arrakis and its precious resource known as the Spice Melange. The film is filled with epic battles, political intrigue, and profound philosophical discussions about destiny, power, and human nature. It's a true feast for the senses, and I found myself completely immersed in this world that Villeneuve has created. But what really sets Dune Part 2 apart is its exploration of character development. We see Paul Atreides evolve from an idealistic young man driven by a sense of justice into a ruthless war leader willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals. His relationship with Chani deepens, and we also get to see more of the complex dynamic between him and his nemesis, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. The performances by the entire cast are simply outstanding, particularly Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides and Zendaya as Chani. In conclusion, Thomas, I found Dune Part 2 to be an incredible cinematic achievement that not only does justice to Herbert's original work, but also manages to stand on its own as a thought-provoking and visually stunning piece of filmmaking. I would give it a solid 8 out of 10 stars.
Well, Timothy, I'm glad to hear you enjoyed it so much. As someone who is more into historical dramas and documentaries than science fiction films, I can see why this adaptation might resonate with you on a deeper level. And speaking of depth, let's talk about the soundtrack for a moment. Hans Zimmer's score was exactly incredible. It perfectly captured the epic scale and emotional weight of the story being told on screen. Each composition felt like an integral part of the narrative, adding another layer to the already rich tapestry that is Dune. Part 2. From the hauntingly beautiful melodies in Paul's dream to the pulse-pounding intensity of the Harkonnen fleet, every track was masterfully crafted and expertly integrated into key moments throughout the film. I especially loved how Zimmer used traditional Middle Eastern instruments like the oud and ney alongside more modern electronic sounds to create an immersive sonic landscape that transported me straight into the world of Arrakis. It's rare for a soundtrack to leave such a lasting impression on me, but in this case, I found myself humming some of those tunes even after leaving the cinema. What did you think about it, Timothy?
Well, Thomas, you've hit the nail on the head with your assessment of Hans Zimmer's soundtrack for Dune. Part 2, it truly is an incredible piece of work that elevates the film to even greater heights. I remember being blown away by some of the musical cues during my first viewing, particularly in scenes like Paul's journey through the desert with Chani, or his final confrontation with Baron Harkonnen. The use of traditional Middle Eastern instruments combined with modern electronic sounds creates a mesmerizing blend that perfectly complements Villeneuve's visually stunning vision for this film. As someone who has spent years working in audio production myself, I can appreciate the level of craftsmanship and attention to detail that went into creating the soundtrack. It's not just background music, it's an integral part of the storytelling process. And speaking of storytelling, Thomas, what did you think about how well done Part 2 wrapped up Paul Atreides' journey from a young, idealistic man to a ruthless war leader? Did you feel that his character arc was convincingly portrayed throughout both parts of this adaptation?
Well, Tim, I must admit that I was impressed by how well the character arc of Paul Atreides was handled throughout both parts of this adaptation. Chalamet's performance was nothing short of remarkable. He managed to convey a wide range of emotions and experiences with grace and depth. We see him transform from an idealistic young man into a ruthless leader who is willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals, all while maintaining an air of vulnerability and humanity that keeps us invested in his journey. His chemistry with Zendaya as Chani was truly outstanding. Their performances felt genuine and deeply connected, which added another layer of authenticity to their characters' relationship.
I couldn't agree more, Thomas. The entire cast delivered incredible performances that brought Herbert's complex characters to life on screen. Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica was mesmerizing to watch. Her transformation from a devoted Bene Gesserit's sister into a conflicted mother figure was masterfully handled by the actress. Her scenes with Chalamet were particularly poignant, showcasing their deep connection and shared history. Josh Brolin and Stellan Skarsgård also gave standout performances as Gurney Halleck and Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, respectively. They managed to embody these villainous characters without relying on over-the-top campiness or stereotypes.
Speaking of the Harkonnens, I have to mention Charlotte Rampling's portrayal of Gaius Helen Mohiam, the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother who serves as the primary antagonist for Paul in Part 1. Her cold and calculating demeanor was both chilling and captivating. It was clear that she saw Paul not just as a threat to her order, but also as an obstacle in the fulfillment of their greater plan. Her scenes with Chalamet had an undercurrent of tension and danger that elevated the stakes for Paul and his Fremen followers.
Now, Thomas, let's not forget about Javier Bardem as Stilgar, Paul's trusted advisor among the Fremen. His performance was a study in subtlety. He managed to convey a sense of wisdom and experience without resorting to cliched elder statesman tropes. His relationship with Paul was complex, marked by both respect and skepticism towards his young leader's plans for Arrakis.
Last, but certainly not least, I want to mention Lea Seydoux as Lady Margot Fenring, the wife of Peter de Vries and confidante to Baron Harkonnen. Her performance was a tour de force. She expertly navigated the characters' shifting allegiances and complex motivations with ease. Her scenes with Brolin and Skarsgård were electric, adding another layer of intrigue and tension to an already compelling narrative.
Well said, Tom. It's truly amazing how well the cast of Dune, Part 2, brought these richly drawn characters to life on screen. They each brought their own unique blend of talent and charisma to their roles, resulting in a film that not only looks stunning, but also features some incredibly powerful performances from start to finish. In conclusion, I think we can both agree that Dune, Part 2, is an epic cinematic achievement that should be celebrated for years to come.
Indeed, Timothy, I couldn't agree more. And speaking of adaptations, it's worth discussing how well this film captures the essence of Herbert's original novel while also standing on its own as a cinematic achievement. For those who are unfamiliar with Dune, it's considered one of the most influential science fiction novels ever written, and for good reason. The story is set in the distant future where humanity has spread across the universe, but is now at risk due to its reliance on a precious resource known as the spice melange. This substance, which can only be found on the desert planet Arrakis or Dune, is essential for space travel and extends human life by decades. The novel follows Paul Atreides, a young nobleman who becomes the central figure in a complex political and religious struggle for control over Dune.
Now, Thomas, let's talk about some of the key differences between the novel and the film adaptation. As you mentioned earlier, the novel is much more detailed and expansive than what we saw on screen. Herbert spent considerable time delving into the history, politics, and religions of the Dune universe, which made it a challenge for Villeneuve to condense all that information into a 2-hour film. As a result, some elements had to be streamlined or omitted altogether. For example, the film focuses primarily on Paul's journey and his relationship with Chani, whereas in the novel, there are several subplots involving other characters that help to flesh out the world of Dune.
Another key difference between the novel and the film is the pacing. The novel takes its time building up to the major conflicts and revelations, often spending entire chapters exploring a character's thoughts or motivations. In contrast, the film moves at a much faster pace, condensing many of these scenes and characters into shorter sequences that serve to advance the plot. This can make it harder for viewers who are unfamiliar with the source material to keep up with everything that's happening on screen.
Despite these differences, I believe that Villeneuve has done an incredible job adapting Dune for the silver screen. He's managed to capture the essence of Herbert's original vision while also creating a visually stunning and emotionally resonant film experience that stands on its own merits. The performances by the cast, particularly Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides and Zendaya as Chani, are simply outstanding, bringing these iconic characters to life in ways that do justice to Herbert's original creations.
And let's not forget about Hans Zimmer's incredible soundtrack. As we discussed earlier, it perfectly captures the epic scale and emotional weight of the story being told on screen. Every composition feels integral to the narrative, adding another layer of depth that immerses viewers in this richly detailed universe.
In conclusion, Dune, Part 2 is a cinematic masterpiece that honors Frank Herbert's original vision while also standing tall as an exceptional piece of filmmaking in its own right. The cast, crew, and creative team have all come together to create something truly special that will undoubtedly resonate with audiences for generations to come. I, for one, can't wait to see where Villeneuve takes us next in his adaptation of the Dune universe.
Well said, Timothy. And speaking of its impact, it's hard to overstate the influence that Frank Herbert's original novel has had on science fiction and popular culture at large. From its groundbreaking exploration of ecology, politics, and religion to its richly detailed universe Filled with unique characters and settings, Dune has been an inspiration for countless authors, filmmakers, and artists over the years.
Absolutely. The themes and ideas presented in Dune have resonated deeply with audiences across generations. Its exploration of power dynamics, the corrupting influence of wealth and religion on society, and the importance of environmental conservation are just as relevant today as they were when Herbert wrote the novel more than half a century ago.
And let's not forget about its cultural impact beyond literature. Dune has spawned numerous spin-offs, prequels, sequels, video games, board games, and even a musical. Its enduring popularity speaks volumes about the universal appeal of Herbert's original story and the characters he created.
Indeed, it's fascinating to see how Dune has transcended its origins as a science fiction novel to become part of our cultural lexicon. The film adaptations, in particular, have had a significant impact on the way we perceive sci-fi movies. They pushed the boundaries of what was possible both technologically and artistically at the time, paving the way for future films like Blade Runner, The Matrix, and Avatar.
And let's not forget about the influence that Dune has had on other works within the science fiction genre itself. Many authors have cited Herbert's novel as a major inspiration for their own work, with some even going so far as to say that Dune changed the way they thought about storytelling and world-building altogether.
It's clear that Dune Part 2 is more than just another science fiction film. It's an event that has captured the imagination of audiences around the globe. The cultural impact of this adaptation and of Frank Herbert's original novel will undoubtedly be felt for years to come. And with Villeneuve's plans for a third and final installment in the works, there's no doubt that Dune's legacy will continue to grow and evolve alongside its fans and admirers.
Well, Timothy, as we wrap up our discussion on Dune, Part 2, I'd like to say that this film is truly an exceptional achievement in both storytelling and filmmaking. It captures the essence of Herbert's original vision, while also presenting a visually stunning and emotionally resonant experience for viewers. The performances by the cast are simply outstanding, bringing these iconic characters to life in ways that do justice to their source material.
I couldn't agree more, Thomas. It's been an absolute pleasure discussing this film with you, and I can't wait to see how Denis Villeneuve continues to bring Frank Herbert's incredible story to life in the final installment of his adaptation. For anyone who hasn't had a chance to experience Dune Part 2 yet, we highly recommend giving it a watch. It's a film that demands your attention and rewards you with its richly detailed world, captivating performances, and thought-provoking themes.
And remember, folks, if you enjoyed our discussion or have your own thoughts on Dune Part 2, we'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. Until next time, happy viewing, and thank you for joining us on this journey through cinema history.